you.
Yeah, thank you. So let's start with when you were born.
I was born in 1954.
1954. Okay. Were you initially from here in Exeter?
No, I was born and raised in Bluefield, West Virginia. I came to Exeter first when I was in the 10th grade in 1969. Uh, so I began my high school career at Phillips Exeter Academy.
Oh wow. At the academy. Okay. Um, what brought you up to the academy?
Uh, the decision to integrate the last schools in the state of West Virginia, which were in my county, was made, and we didn't like the way they were choosing to integrate. They were doing so by closing the black schools and then dispersing all the leadership and everything throughout the rest of the county. And we knew we were losing a great deal. So we protested. There were other choices they could have made. And so this was maybe when I was in the 8th grade and the summer after that. And so our failure to change the decision of the local board of education, it was a big community effort. And I was reflecting on it with my father one day and said, I don't even want to go to school out there. The suspicious part of me saying that they wanted the athletes that the black high school had at the white high school. The white high school had not been successful recently athletically, and the black high school had been consistently at the state champions on every level, really. And so I said, I don't want to go to school out there. My father said, well, your mother and I always wanted both you and your brother to go away to school. And so we began looking for schools, and it turns out that in its growth into a national school, Phillips Exeter Academy had some contacts in the town where I grew up. They were not contacts that I would normally have had any access to, because this is a woman who taught in the junior high school that you would have gone to had you had any money. You would have lived on that side of the town, and so it was just not a world that I would have had any access to, really, had I not been trying to find a school. And we wrote to an organization called A Better Chance, ABC, and it had been organized in order to locate promising students from inner cities and placing them in prep schools or suburban high schools with families. And they wrote back and said that we made too much money. My father taught at Bluefield State College. My mother was a social worker, so they were outside of the income requirements. But they sent my name to Phillips Exeter, Phillips Academy in Andover, and St. Paul's. And this woman in town was a interviewer for Phillips Exeter, and we had an optometrist in common who spoke well of me to her and of her to my parents. So it was just an interesting kind of a weird connection, and so she interviewed me and said she was going to recommend that they accept me, and so I came to Phillips Exeter.
Okay. What was that jump going from?
I'd never gone to school with any white people. I didn't have any white friends, never been taught by any white folks. So Phillips Exeter was my doorway to the world. I met people from other countries. I met Chinese people. I met Korean people for the first time. And I had white friends for the first time. So it was, and it was an interesting time. So this is 1969, and the colleges had erupted previous year, and it ended up being the year that Kent State happened and Jackson State happened. Those were both incidents that resulted in the deaths of students and protests. It was in the height of the Vietnam controversy. Dr. King had just been killed before I came. So it was and the students who were at Phillips Exeter were ABC students, and they came. The majority of the black students at the time were students who had come through the ABC program or similar programs, and they were successful, and there were a number of them at the time. And they came with a mission. They came understanding that they were a first wave of people with a particular type of an opportunity, and that they had a responsibility to do something positive with it on behalf of the community that they came from, and that became the way we all felt. So we all wanted to be of use. And it was a very, it was hard. Phillips Exeter was difficult. There was one black faculty member, and the black students had to learn to take care of themselves. We did take care of each other. So it was a very interesting time, very difficult, and very exciting. Yeah.
Did you find, you said that the black students had to take care of themselves. Were you able to find any other peers at that time, like either if they were international or anywhere else where you found support?
Well, let me not speak poorly of the white faculty members of Phillips Exeter. My advisor was white, and I felt very well supported by him, and we were as well served by them as they were able to serve us. This was not a time when, this is at the beginning of the articulation of grievance by regular black people. It was before there was any backlash to that by regular white people. So it was a very unique and narrow period of time in American history where it may have been good to be black. It's just not many times in American history where that was the case. This may have been it. And at the same time, I know that's hardly the case. Dr. King had been killed. Malcolm X had been killed. The Black Panthers were still active, trying to provide free lunches, and what they were really doing was being distorted in the press. They were frightening the people because organized black people generally are frightening to the status quo in America.
Did you ever have an interaction with anyone from the Black Panthers at that time?
Yeah, I think they were in my hometown. They weren't all that strong there, but I had met some of them. They had, and then people who had gone to larger cities and come back had some of their ideology that they were able to speak about. But I think in my family we were definitely leaning in the nonviolent direction because of Dr. King and because of our faith.
When you went from being in Virginia to
West Virginia.
West Virginia.
We tend to get picky about that.
I can understand. To be in West Virginia, come all the way up here to New Hampshire. Did you see maybe people might have not been as threatening? There might have been that lack of tension at all.
Well, it was clear we were unfamiliar in this. Both of us were black. If there were three of us walking down the street, we would be aware of police cars beginning to circle. So we clearly were not welcome. At the beginning of my 11th grade year, at the preseason football practice.
You played football?
No, I didn't. But I went out for the team. But there was a controversy. Some local townies had verbally assaulted one of the students who was black. And he ran back to the dining hall complaining this, and all the post-grads got up and ran after him. They were going to support and beat up these townies. So that was unusual and exciting because I had never been. So the idea of having like a violent response to someone taunting you is very much what might have happened at home. And because that's just, there were different manners. It was a different grammar for being in the place. But I had never seen anyone white respond in that way to someone else white on my behalf or on behalf of people who look like me. So that was really just, I mean, it was surprising, confusing, and thrilling. The PGs that year they had never known anyone like them. They were very different. Physically they were just big. They were just much more than I had ever seen. I was always a big guy, but they were big and muscular, and they looked mean, and some of them were very hairy. So they got really upset and angry on our behalf. They had immediately, there wasn't a barrier to be breached because we were different races. They were here because we were the same school. They had chosen sides, and it was us versus them, and we were clearly part of the us, and it was just interesting because I remember it very well, and nothing happened. Either the townies were gone or I don't remember what happened as a result, but nothing violent happened. But that they were prepared to do that and that they responded that immediately was just that was new. That was different. This level of dynamic interaction between blacks and whites as equals was very new. In the South, there was a lot of interaction between blacks and whites. It had been for years and years and years. There was no lack of familiarity. If you were a white person growing up in the South, you would know black people of various conditions. You would know of black doctors at least, and everything else, and so you wouldn't have some of the stereotypes about black people. You would not have, because you would have had enough contact to know better and know differently if you grew up in the South. In the North, you didn't have a lot of contact, so that your views of you as a white man's view of black people was more conditioned by what you had seen in the media and other stereotypes that you might have been presented. But in other words, none of those would have been confronted by your personal experiences. You would have had very few of them. And so there always has been a sense of unfamiliarity on the part of whites in this area, as far as I can see. Just kind of not really sure about who black people are or how they function, and an unwillingness to believe that the racism that they had attributed to the South might be present here. I live in the only town I've ever lived in where I've been called the N-word on the street. Just called it, walking down the street, someone yelling out of a car. It has happened several times to me in this town, the town of Exeter, New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. It has never happened to me in Bluefield, West Virginia, or anywhere in the South. Only in Exeter, New Hampshire have I been called the N-word while walking on the street. When I had an advisee who was from Nashville, and within the first 2 weeks of his time on campus, he had 4 racial incidents. 2 of them involved teenagers driving a car on the sidewalk to try to hit him. The 4th one was witnessed by some other students, and it was upsetting to them, and they said, "Well, who's your advisor?" And he said, "It was me." And they took him right to me and told me what had happened. I said, when I learned that this had happened before, I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" He said, "Well, I figured this is what you get. I came to school in New Hampshire." This is a kid from the South who had never had this happen to him in the South. Such a thing just would not happen in the South. No one's going to try to chase a black kid down, because it doesn't happen. But it happened here, and he figured it was a norm that the reputation of New Hampshire was worse than what he could expect at home in Tennessee. He said, "Well, I came to school in New Hampshire. I figured this is what I get." Yeah, so when I would tell people this, they were shocked. They wouldn't believe. They didn't want to believe it.
Sorry to hear that.
Well, it comes about because of a lack of interaction. If there had been more opportunities for blacks and whites to get together, perhaps more whites would be aware of the racism of their peers. Racial danger? No, I think that, so when I was growing up, West Virginia was a Democratic state.
Okay.
And it actually, the county where I lived when President Kennedy was shot, because it had been understood to be the county that had pushed John Kennedy over the edge to win, there was talk of changing the name, like to Kennedy, West Virginia, or Kennedyanna, or there was talk like that. So it was a very different time, and even Senator Robert Byrd, who had been a Klansman, publicly underwent a transformation. And though there were many who doubted, as he lived the rest of his life, I really think that he lived it as, lived up to that transformation that he attested to, and became a champion for civil rights and other things that you would not expect of someone who had once been a member of the Ku Klux Klan. So I have never had a specific, I grew up with this awareness of whites, and there was certainly some animosity, and we lived in different worlds, and I knew about racism, and I heard about the Klan being close by, but I never saw the Klan except in this town. And I never was assaulted verbally except in this town. And though I can't say that I felt, the question of did I feel safe or unsafe, I think the honest answer is I have felt unsafe in neither place. I have been aware of where I've been in both places. I know that there may be some racial animus, and to be a black man in this country and not be aware of the reality of racial animus is to put yourself in danger. I have to be aware of it. I have to teach my son how to behave when he stopped by a police officer. I have to because that is what you must do in order to just maintain the status quo, meaning life. Before anything else happens, you have to be aware of that. It is dangerous for a black man not to be aware of that in this country, and that's really anywhere. So that's a truth that seems very harsh. The truth is that all of my friends know this, and all of my friends are also patriots. Yeah. So that to be a black American means that you embrace the promises of America while honestly acknowledging the ways America has not stepped up to its creeds.
No. I'm curious, how does that wash over you when you have to teach your son how to behave?
It's just part of the giving. It's just part of what it is. You teach him to zip up his pants, how to buckle his pants, and how to act around police officers. It's what you have to do. It's one of the givens. It's not even worth having a sense of. It's just what you have to do. But you have to wash your face. You don't want to go through the trouble of lathering and soaping. You have to wash your face every day. It's just what you do. Okay.
Yeah. Did you watch the moon landing broadcast in '69?
I was at that time. I had an appendicitis. Okay. And I can remember walking in the corridor and looking at the landing on the black and white television at the hospital. And yes, so I remember that. I have a visual memory of that, and I remember being very much aware that it was too bad that I was in the hospital and kind of drugged, because I know that was a very significant thing that I'm watching.
Were you reading about the space race at all?
Well, all of us were. You could not know about it. Like I was, in 1960, I was in the first grade. So that was when I think Sputnik happened, I think. Or maybe it was just before then. So that this race and this battle between Russia and the United States, or the Soviet Union and the United States, we were the generation of duck and cover. Do you know about duck and cover?
Yeah, for nuclear bombs.
Yes. So I can remember doing that, covering my head and dunking onto my desk, like that's supposed to stop us. I don't know if they really believed that was supposed to stop us, or if they just felt this is what we want to tell folks so they can pretend so they can believe that there's a way to stop this, which we know is ridiculous because there's no way to stop this, especially not by ducking and covering. I don't know that no one questioned it.
Yeah. Did you watch any of the programs like that came out I think it was like the day after, and it was supposed to be some horror movie about the day after a nuclear bomb went off.
Well, I've seen a couple of things like that more recently. I don't remember any back then.
Okay. I remember in one of my film history classes there was during film, I can't remember which class it was, but we get to this point and we're talking in like the 60s about, well, now we're talking about people making movies for nuclear bombs going off, what to do, how this would affect you.
Yeah. Well, so I'm sure there was a lot of that, but I mean, so much was different about the media landscape then compared to now.
Yeah. Did you ever, speaking about nuclear bombs, did you ever see anything from Hiroshima at all? Any pictures while you were young?
Oh, while I was young?
Yeah.
No, I don't remember seeing pictures of what happened.
Okay.
I don't remember seeing pictures of that at all. I certainly knew about it. Mm-hmm. But I don't remember seeing any photographs until I was well into adulthood.
Okay. All right. Did you know any World War II veterans when?
My father was a World War II veteran.
He was?
Yeah.
Oh wow. What did he do?
Well, he said he was in Europe and that he was in the motor pool. He didn't talk about it very much, and nor did any of his peers. I never heard any. The closest I ever had to someone talking about it was a man who was a custodian in the building I lived in when I was in seminary and who had a drinking problem. And I remember seeing him shortly after work one day, and he was kind of in a bad shape. And I hugged him and said, Cleve, what happened? What happened? And he started talking about the war, just kind of talking about the war. Yeah. He wasn't making a lot of sense, but he was babbling about the war, just talking about stuff, and which told me that it had been a traumatic experience to him and that he not ever really recovered from it.
Yeah.
But the thing of talking about, that's much latter. That's not mid-century. That's last quarter century talk, or last tenth of a century talk. It wasn't customary to talk about this stuff. It wasn't, and I don't know why, except that either they didn't have the language to talk about it, or it was traumatic for them, and just by common agreement, they just never talked about it.
Okay.
Instead, they would go to American Legion and hang out together and drink. Again, never talking about it.
Okay. Did you ever experience that with Vietnam veterans at all?
Yeah.
People just didn't talk about it?
Yeah, actually, my first experience with a Vietnam veteran was, well, I remember one guy from home being killed, but then my best friend's oldest brother came back, and he kind of went crazy, and he tried to kill his girlfriend, and maybe he shot himself, and anyway, it was just horrible. He just never was the same. He was someone that was, everyone really liked him and looked up to him, and he was responsible. He had talents, he had gifts. He went away to the war, and he came back ruined and committed suicide. I think that what I learned was that anyone who went to war came back wounded, because there were others in our community who were living with the aftermath of war. I remember one man up the street who was, well, everyone just knew that he never recovered. That's why he acted in the peculiar way that he did. He wasn't dangerous, he wasn't violent, but he was not normal.
Yeah. And
he was flamboyantly not normal. And we knew other people, and most of them drank a lot. There's a lot of drinking in my hometown that was a way of coping.
Yeah. So there was a lot of, or at least from what I see, there's a lot of like flower power rock and roll and hippie movement. Was that kind of like popular here in Exeter, West Virginia, or?
So the experience of those social phenomena were different in the black community compared to the white community. So that flower power and hippies and all that was really more white folks.
Okay.
Now there were some black folks who made it back to Bluefield who had been influenced by that, and we kind of could see they were a little different. They'd been out to California, they came back a little different than if they'd been to, to New York for their city experience or Columbus, Ohio for their city experience. That when you went to California, something happened. And we knew that there was that kind of, and there was certainly some, no, there really wasn't the type of drug issues that were problems didn't really it took a while for them to get to my hometown. The really dangerous or irresponsible, flamboyantly irresponsible drug usage didn't get to Bluefield very quickly. And the countercultural stuff, even really long hair, so they just didn't. It took a while.
Yeah.
Today we would think it would take a couple of weeks, but no, it took a while for all that stuff. We heard about it, kept hearing about it, seeing the presentation of it on television, but only because every now and then someone from California would come and begin to speak about this stuff, and it would begin to filter down. That's how those ideals became manifest in our world.
Like, did you notice the changes of how people were dressing, listening to the music, or bringing in new music?
Well, yeah. I mean, that was a part of what was changing. That most things were being challenged, and a lot of people were wearing their hair long, and there were some challenges to the standard aesthetics. So that.
How did you feel when you were seeing that stuff for the first time starting to happen?
I thought it was great. James Brown had this song, "Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud," and that was the claiming. That was the way of saying, I'm going to grab this thing that they think is going to hurt me. I'm going to say, no, this is who I am, and I'm going to be this way. And that was the transformation of language.
So I'm curious about this too. How did you feel about seeing or hearing about Jimi Hendrix?
Well, Jimi Hendrix was just this. I didn't listen to that kind of music, and so he wasn't a. The people in my world who were like Jimi Hendrix were folks who had been to California, and so they were a little different.
Okay.
And in a sense, they were the other. Because there just weren't enough of them in my world that I was going to be. And Jimi Hendrix was this. I just didn't get it.
Okay.
I remember Woodstock, and I remember his version of the national anthem, which I thought was pretty cool at the time.
Yeah.
But Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, and there were some others, I guess, around that age. All of whom, I think, all died at the same age too, either 27 or 29.
Yeah, they never made it past 30.
But it was either 27 or 29. I can't remember what age it was, but so they were. That was not really a part of my real world. I was aware of it, but it wasn't a part of my world.
Okay.
It wasn't where I was. It wasn't.
And so, like compared to what's in the mainstream media at that time, like, could you at least give like a little sense into what was your world? At least kind of like an elevator pitch, like.
Of what my world was in terms of media?
Yeah, in comparison to the mainstream media, the things that people talk about for
well,
a decade.
If I understand your question accurately, so So in mainstream media, there were not many representations of me, and that was known. We weren't expecting to see ourselves. We were hoping. We were never expecting we were going to really see ourselves on the media. That just wasn't something that, so that we rejoiced. There was Room 222, there was Julia, there was Bill Cosby from I Spy, there was, and every now and then there was a movie. But so, as far as the media was concerned, it was not where we looked to find images of ourselves. And although we looked to always to begin to see images of ourselves like that, so that the America that I was a part of was one that was becoming better, and we were actively trying to help it to become better. America was not where it should have been, could be, or would be, because we're going to make sure that it continues to post. To a great degree, I'm still that way. I still, I'm an aspirational patriot. I did a little thing that, I'm an aspirational patriot. That really is what it is. I really love my nation, and I aspire that, I hope that one day we can be the nation we're supposed to be. So.
Is that what helped inspire you to get into seminary?
No, it was much more personal than it didn't have much to do with, I didn't have a mission to reform the world. I really was just trying to, I just had to do, for me is this what God really wants me to do? Mm-hmm. And ultimately I had to acknowledge, this is what God wants me to do. Okay. And it was about serving God for me as opposed to reforming the community. It's like I understood if I was going to really serve God, there were some things that would have to happen that went without saying, like most of the positive, most of the aspirations of the civil rights movement, and were things that I embraced and accepted. These are things we must strive for. We have to work towards this.
Has Martin Luther King, as him being a reverend, was he ever inspirational to you?
In becoming a minister?
Yeah.
No, he had nothing to do with that. Yes, he is very inspirational to me. I truly admire Dr. King. Yeah. I admire him as an intellect because of him, it's okay to be smart and black. That's really good. And he was an incredible speaker, and he was incredibly courageous. I think it would be difficult to have grown up, having been born in 1954, and not have considered seriously nonviolence and who Dr. King was and who Malcolm X was, and what does it mean for me today or any of those other todays once they were assassinated. What then do I do with that? What is called upon of me to make sure they did not die in vain because they died for the cause that is also me? How do I honor them? Overtly or covertly, those questions were ones I was living to answer. And I never felt that I was alone in that. I think that they what they represented, the hope for justice and for full citizenship that both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, full humanity, worked for, were values that I just think they were just pervasive. I don't think anyone questioned those values or that those were worthy efforts. Maybe the techniques or the means were not as worthy, but nothing. All of these were most worthy goals, and working in order to manifest those goals was always worthwhile. So I guess that I guess I would have to say that my life was definitely conditioned by the notion of that I have to make that my life has to be worth something, that it must be worth something to those who are coming after me, that that a life with purpose included this. Those values were furthered by my time at Phillips Exeter Academy, which is a value-driven institution, at least it was in those days. And they all helped me to feel that my life had a great deal of meaning. Because the institutions that were shaping my life were institutions of meaning.
All right. So now that we start getting into the 70s, you graduated Phillips Exeter. What did you do after that?
I went to Wesleyan University, and then I went to seminary.
Okay.
And then I began pastoring.
Okay. Was it right away in college you decided you wanted to go into seminary?
No, it wasn't until my senior year. So the formal study of these things was very different from going to Sunday school, and I had some formal religious training, or I studied religion as an academic discipline while I was a student at Phillips Exeter and again in college. So I was accustomed to the study of religion as phenomena. But was I how did it change? Well, I had to understand. My definition of being a Christian was I had to find some core definition. I studied some formal theological perspectives. One thing that happened while I was there is that we were learning about liberation theology, which was actually first articulated at the seminary I attended, and the notion of liberation theology says that when God moves in history, God sets people free, which means when God uses in your history, you are set free. My history, when God moves in the history of our nation, this nation is brought to greater freedom. And then there were three branches of this liberation theology that we were shown. Latin American theology, liberation theology, focused on economic and said as long as there was injustice, then there would never be true freedom. So that economic injustice was the core. And then there was black theology, which said that the core injustice is race. And then there was feminist theology that said the core injustice is against women. So studying that, recognizing that as I came to recognize that each perspective was legitimate and correct, really forced me then to find another common ground. And so for me, it just began, you just really have to continue to love. And if you can make that love active, you can make it systemic. Any way you can do it, the challenge is still to love. That was my answer. Perhaps, I know it was not original, but it was what I came up with as I was trying to make sense of these erstwhile competing views of liberation. Like, which one is the one that's truly necessary to be truly free? So that was very exciting to go to seminary at that time. To have as my laboratory New York City, and which is, what does the ministry mean? What does it mean to be a minister in this place? So I think that those experiences have really allowed me to focus my preaching on the here and now. Like these words of the gospel, they must have some meaning and some application today, or else what's the purpose? What's the use? It can't just be for the promise of heaven. That doesn't satisfy me. So, it gets down to the fact, okay, God created everything. He created me with this type of mind so that I am inclined not to believe this or be satisfied with these simple answers. I have to accept that. This is my mind. Scripture says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. I got to keep questioning until I'm satisfied. Others maybe question less or question more, but that's part of their journey with God. I don't know how that fits exactly with the question you're asking me to begin to reflect on how going to seminary might have made an impact on my understanding of God. I did come to recognize that the way that African Americans celebrate Jesus Christ is not the same as the way that European Americans celebrate Jesus Christ. The language is a little different. The interaction is a little different. The reason for connecting is a little different. And so I began to recognize that. And I am not satisfied with easy or pat answers. And I'm always restless because I'm looking for the thing that connects us. I just think it's too important for us to find a way to live in community. It's just too important. And so to find some language that can connect, or to be careful about what one's communicating, to check to see where the other person is, those are things that I've learned to do and that I think are necessary. Yeah. And all of it perhaps began at seminary.
All right. I liked that answer. That's a good answer. I enjoyed hearing that.
Okay.
All right. So you get out of seminary in the 70s. 70s, I've heard, I've never really heard like something that was very, in at least terms of media, it was something that was just definitive of that decade, or something that was big enough to stamp a label on it. I've heard that there was a lot of disco in the 70s.
Well, it started in the late 70s. It really is, I would say disco is more functional in the early 80s, but maybe it was late 70s, 78, 79 maybe. Maybe 79, 80, I think, really more. But, yeah, disco was big.
Was there anything going on in the news that you're hearing about that really caught your eye at that time?
Well, everything. I mean, there was the war, there was always their civil rights, there was the women's movement, there was Nixon. Ugh.
How did you feel when you heard Watergate first breaking out?
Well, I thought that when Gerald Ford pardoned him, that it was a betrayal. Because one thing I had learned was that the greater your responsibility, then the greater your accountability. And here was a man with the greatest responsibility of all, and he was not held accountable for his wrongdoings. He was let off. I mean, he had to resign, but that's not really appropriate accountability. So I remember feeling very strong about that, and very, very disappointed. And I remember having to really struggle with what did that mean? What did that mean about justice if he was not held accountable? It made me feel it was really difficult. And college and seminary were times when I didn't salute the flag. I just refused to. And when it was played and we were at ball games, like in college, we'd open up a bottle of wine and start passing it just as a way of as our commentary on what we thought of our nation's delivery of justice, and in protest to the historic ambivalence that our nation has had towards its citizens of African descent. So I drank a lot of tawny port to the Star Spangled Banner. But for me, the 70s were also a time where I had to confront the fact that in spite of what I might be angry about America, I am inevitably an American. I sold encyclopedias one summer in Canada, and even in Canada, I was forced to recognize how American I am. And I just had never had that experience before where I felt like I had to defend America, and it was unexpected. That summer helped me to see that I loved my nation more than I had known, and helped me to understand that I inevitably bore the marks of being an American, that I couldn't escape it. No matter how I felt or what I felt about this nation, this was my nation. I think that my summer selling encyclopedias brought that home for me in a way that I had not quite recognized before. and that was I no longer felt that I could just easily just kind of do whatever I wanted to do or speak in a casual way. Oops. I don't know if I might have just damaged this. So.
No worries.
Or,
it's durable.
or speak,
why I bought it.
or speak in a casual way about, being American. I just had to, I think, saying those words of the notion of patriotism and what it meant to be an American changed after my summer selling encyclopedias in Canada in ways that were surprising.
Did seeing, like, as an example, like the women's movement going on and some of the civil rights, did that also have an impact on that?
I always felt that the women's movement had a problem because it didn't really address the issues of black women, and so it was really a white women's movement. And I saw that almost from the beginning. It was also perhaps part of the conversation about that in the black community.
Do you see that it left out non-white women overall?
I wasn't thinking about non-white at that time. It was black. But you asked me to look back, and yes, definitely that includes all women of color. But at the time, that wasn't the way we didn't think those constructs were not current. So I guess I am aware that there was a sense that there was some need to push back on the image of America as failed power or as doing bad things in the world. A lot of people of my generation were aware of what happened in Central and South America, what United Fruit did, and America's part in that, and what we have done across the globe to support unjust rulers. It's part of our history, and that perhaps because I'm black, it was a part of history that was never hidden from me. The way it was hidden from a lot of white folks just didn't quite see that history. But it was never, so I was never, my view of America was never so limited. I've been aware of the evils of America so that I think my love of my nation is a little better because it's not illusory. It's not based on a lie. Or it's based on less of a lie than it is for those who might not see it that way. In the 80s?
Yeah. Like hip hop and rap and some of the gang violence that was going on.
Well, there's always been a lot of so rap was I don't even want to begin to comment on rap. I mean, on how it came up. I mean, I was in New York at the time, and I didn't see it as some great poetic. I mean, it was a way folks were making music, and it had a good beat. People enjoying the dance, and then suddenly everybody was talking about it, And I said, oh, okay, so this is a little different. It started in Brooklyn. No, it started in the Bronx. I don't want, So I guess that I don't see that there's ever been a time when entertainers were not expected to also represent positively. They have always done that to a greater or lesser degree, and some more successfully than others. I think that to be black in the public, certainly up to a certain point, you always understood that you were representing. You were representing the people, and that you were also teaching. So I just, so that when Sidney Poitier was in a movie, it mattered that he did well. When he slapped Virgil Tibbs in The Heat of the Night, I think in the movie, I think that we cheered. It was that was huge. Right on, Sidney. So.
Some of my favorite actors too.
Yeah, I mean, so those were big things. There was unanimity and the need to progress, and in the expectation that we could and would, in its inevitability. and in the inevitability of pain and suffering that would be a part of it. And it may have been in the 80s that I began singing spirituals. And I did so consciously deciding that I'm going to transform all this negative into a positive. What the spirituals did, the spirituals always do that. You know, those songs, it's like, you know, the very fact that I can sing about feeling like a motherless child means that I've grown up, you know, so that I can reflect, and I know what that feels like. And sometimes that's me, but that's not all there is. You know, the notion of really moving forward with some dignity and claiming strength, while at the same time acknowledging otherwise unimaginable difficulties and barriers. That's part of what it is, you know. And so I'll sing these songs as evidence, and I figure like every time I'm singing them, I'm proof that the faith of my ancestors was valid. Because had that not been the case, I could not stand here and sing this song. I wouldn't be here. So understand that when I'm singing, I am saying yes to the faith of those people who prayed hundreds of years ago. And it made a difference. Their prayers made a difference. So that's a profound truth to me.
What was it like that first time singing one of the spirituals?
I have no idea.
I have no idea.
No, it was just too long ago.
Too long ago. Okay. Interesting. Has anyone ever approached you and felt moved by any of your sermons or singing at all?
Hopefully every time I do it.
I always enjoy hearing you sing.
Often after I preach, people do thank me, and they're able to say some things in particular that moved them. Or after I sing, if I've chosen a good song perhaps, or maybe done it particularly well, people will speak of being moved, and they'll share that with me. I've come to recognize some things that people say to me are so over the top and beyond anything that I'm able to do, that I've had to recognize, okay, so sometimes God is present in doing something for people that is beyond what I can do, and that's good. So I just say to those people, thank God for that. You know, like one woman said that her religious journey began when she heard me sing Amazing Grace. I'm saying, yeah, well, clearly that's more than me. So I just said, well, you need to just thank God for that. I said, you know, I mean, that's kind of blows your mind. You know, I'm often embarrassed by it. I find that at one point in my life, I needed that type of approval. And so it made me feel very self-conscious and embarrassed when I received it. I was ashamed that I needed it or that I loved it so much. And that was a journey of mine for a while. And I used to speak, because in the black community, a lot of positive attention is put on a preacher who can move people to tears or whatever, or to conversion. And I could never do that with my preaching, but I could do it or close to it with my singing. And so my preaching was jealous of my singing. Racial awareness on the part of white citizens and colleagues and community members and friends is more so. Whites are more aware of their identity as white people than before, and that seems to have been difficult for white people. Like many lessons, it is a lesson that white people have had to learn on their own. I can remember telling a group I was speaking to at Phillips Exeter that I was tired of trying to convince them that there were difficulties, or explain to them why I had to teach my son how to act before the police when he was 11 years old, and that I'm tired of trying to convince you this is something that's real and I'm not just overreacting or creating a problem. And I remember telling them, I'm tired of this. I don't have to convince people anymore. They understand this is the world. They understand there's much less confusion or naivete about America. And I think that people are given, it gives people pause to hear a black person speak with an understanding of America's wrongs, and yet, as a patriot, still speak about the country. That is something that people are beginning to be humbled by.
Like Michael Brown, people start opening up more, listening more. Did it really take up until...
I don't think that there was a real change after Rodney King or after OJ, which were closer in time, I think, than I'm. No, I didn't think there was a lot of change. I think there has been some change since Michael Brown and the others in the last 6 years. That's caused more change and more reflection. That those have been much more significant in terms of moving the needle in terms of as far as racial understanding is concerned. And I think that those events have pushed white citizens to really look at themselves in ways that none other has in my lifetime.
Okay. And you're finding, are people coming up to you and talking about it?
I mean, there are many opportunities to discuss these things. I mean, I'm the president, or I was the founding president of the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire, and on that board, we're putting out these things. We're trying to uncover stories. We're celebrating the historic presence of Africans in our state that have not been known. That has not been known. So I can say that I've been working more, and there have been more questions asked. People have been more interested, and a lot of white folks are taking responsibility for their own racial understanding and growth, and that's different. And the truth is, I think there's always been some progress, a little bit more every year. More people kind of getting it and understanding what getting it means. More people being honest to reflect on what it is to be who they are. Really hearing me and understanding why I might, for instance, teach my son how to behave around police officers. That's a real thing. So I think that there's been a lot of improvements, and it's been slow, but I'd say steady. I'd say my friends who, maybe when, like colleagues at Phillips Exeter, at one point when the school was trying to teach multiculturally, many saw it as an inconvenience, and I think that they're seeing it more as it's just something they need to get. And they understand, I think that colleges have changed some, that they're teaching more about difference and about cross-cultural, the possibilities as a result of living in a multicultural environment, what then tomorrow might look like or could look like, and really more aware of the various facets of today of which you might have been unaware before this. So there's been some movement, and yes, I do have more conversations, but no, people don't usually stop me. People don't usually stop me on the street and want to have conversations, but I think that if I went up to someone in a restaurant and began to ask them some things, I think they might be a little more prepared to respond to me and answer and reflect about racial differences. I don't expect to hear any white person say, "I don't even notice that you're black," because that's a real insult. It's a real insult. Not to notice that I'm black, you're not really seeing me. I notice that you're white. And so that's kind of what I always want to say to them. And I don't hear that anymore.
Okay. Are you finding more that people are just treating like a person?
So I don't know that I'm typical. I know I'm not typical. I've never been typical. Sometimes that's a negative so that people can say, well, most black people are not like you. You're the exceptional black man. Which is like, how dare you? You know, you don't even know, do you? And the answer is, no, I guess I don't. So I think that I don't feel so foreign. I think the more people who look like me around, you know, I'm not the only one anymore. That experience is just not as commonly revisited as it once was, of being the only one. I don't feel that so much.
So for my last question for you, do you have a message or anything you'd like to share for future generations?
I just don't give up. Don't give up on the ideals of America. Don't deceive yourself and think that we've accomplished or have arrived. My sense is that whenever we begin to feel we have arrived, then we have proven that we have not. There should always be, you know, we need to continue to strive. We should always be aspirational and seeing our nation because the goals of our nation are enduring and probably and always in need of being reached for. We're never quite there, but they're worthy. And I think that it's really good and necessary and helpful if people can honestly reach for a deeper or more honest understanding of what it means to be an American and really wade through the hype. Let's just look at some reality here. I think that it's important for, I don't know that I can say a lot to those who are like oath keepers or those types of people, except to just tell them that they cannot claim that this is their nation as long as I can say, no, I have an ancestor in 1725 who was enslaved in Louisiana. And part of her work and the work of her children and their children made it possible for your people to have some fabric to weave into something when y'all came over here from Europe. So, you know, had it not been for us, there would be no you. And I feel like I'm always happy to say that, to remind people that, especially when they begin to claim some right to America that excludes me, that they better step back. Because my folks were here before you, and we made it possible for you to have some useful work to do. So I think that what I want to do is what I would like future generations to know is that in 1776, the nation defined itself according to certain ideals and aspirations. And in 2022, those goals and aspirations are still unmanifest, unrealized completely, and still worthy, though, of being aspired to. So I guess for them, I don't think you're going to finish, but it's a worthwhile effort. And I hope they are continuing to do what I've been trying to do and what those who went before me were trying to do. I really hope they are, because that's the way that we can finally realize the America that we hope for and dream of.
All right, thank you, Bob.
You're very welcome.